Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Between the Lines podcast. I'm EDGYTIM, your co-host, along with Mike Clark. And Mike, just want to let you know, I just got back from the 8A game, so looking forward to looking forward to talking about there's so many ongoings this weekend between the Prep Bowl and the IHSA State Final Games. A lot to talk to, a lot to get into. So, Mike, welcome aboard, and yeah, we got a lot to cover here, don't we?
We do. So let's start out with just a quick recap of the actual games.
Yep.
We'll run down those and then talk about them a little bit more in depth. 1A, Altha 57, Lena Winslow 14, De'Ara Hill Jr., the Oregon commit, 32 carries, 443 yards, 5 touchdowns. He's on a level unlike almost anybody else. I mean, some people think he's the best player in the state, regardless of class. 2A, Chicago Christian 47, Maroa Forsyth 0. Kenny Jager 38 carries, 225 and a TD. For the Knights, Christian Flutman 8 carries, 86 yards, 3 TDs. He was also 12 of 16 passing for 132 yards, 2 TDs. And Maroa Forsyth had a state record 23 total yards, which breaks the record. Somebody DM'd to me that record was actually set by JCA back in the Gordy Gillespie days. 3A, Montini 49, Monticello 8. Israel Abrams 10 of 16 passing, 225, 3 TDs for the Broncos. C.J. Harkins, 2 catches, 123, 2 touchdowns. Jeremiah Peterson, 13 carries, 134 and a TD. And Mike Bukowski, Montini coach, becomes the first coach in Illinois history to win state titles in 3 different sports.
Very cool.
He has also won in wrestling and in softball. In 4A, DePaul Prep 40, Mount Zion 6. Nick Martinez for the Rams, 19 carries, 100 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And that takes care of the Friday games. On Saturday in 5A, Nazareth 29, Joliet Catholic 27. The only close game of the entire weekend. Logan Malachuk, 18 of 31, 336, 4 touchdowns for Naz. Trevin Walker, 4 catches, 122 receiving, 2 touchdowns. And Frankie Nichols, who is the backup quarterback to Logan Malachuk and will probably be the Roadrunners quarterback next year, had 2 huge plays on special teams. He had a 24-yard run on a fake punt that started at the Nazareth 3-yard line. And he also threw a 2-point conversion pass as a holder on a PAT that wound up being the difference in the game. For JCA, Larry Stringham, 23 carries, 147 yards. Nate McGreeny, 21 for 125 and a touchdown. And Lucas Simulik, their quarterback, 5 of 10, 126 and 2 TDs. In 6A, East St. Louis, 48, Geneva, 28. Kendrick Lyons, 14 of 21, 225, 2 TDs for the Flyers. Laravius Woods, 10 catches, 10 rushes, 113 yards, 3 TDs. Ronnie Gomiller, 5 catches, 128 and 2 TDs. And for Geneva, Tony Chahino, 20 of 39, 323 yards, 3 touchdowns. Talon Taylor had 15 touches as a receiver and a returner, 235 and a TD. And this game was actually close midway through the third. It was 34-28 before East St. Louis got the last 2 scores. Mount Carmel in 7A, 55-34 over Batavia. Jack Elliott, 16 of 26, 301 yards, 6 touchdowns, 8 carries, 115, and a touchdown. So 7 total touchdowns for Jack. Quentin Burrell had a couple of TDs. Cooper Lehman, 5 catches, 114 and a touchdown. And Michael Vanderloot Guerin returning to, not returning, I guess, but playing where his dad, quarterback Marion Catholic, to the 1993 state title at Hancock Stadium. The sophomore from Batavia was 29 of 47, 390, 3 touchdowns, and Brett Berggren had 8 catches for 191 and 3 touchdowns. And finally, in the 8A game, Loyola 35, York 14. Ryan Fitzgerald was 12 of 21, 160 yards, 3 touchdowns. Drew McPherson, 19 carries, 152 touchdowns. And for York, Bruno Massel, 17 rushes, 141 yards, a touchdown, 6 of 18 passing for 81. And Jimmy Connors, 4 carries, 82 yards, including a really long TD run early before he left the game with an injury. So those are his scores and highlights. And
let me give you
got to watch.
Yeah, let me give you a couple. I'll give you a couple thoughts. I was very fortunate. I was in incredibly warm WCIU studios in downtown Chicago, so not disappointed in my decision whatsoever to decide to do TV for the second year. I mean, just the blowouts on Friday. Mike, I would love to tell you that I was shocked by it, but I really wasn't. The one that really shocked me out of all of them, honestly, was Chicago Christian Maroa Forsyth. I mean, Maroa Forsyth is a team that has been there pretty consistently. Maroa is consistently just a really strong team, and Chicago Christian just kind of locked them down. I mean, I see in your notes, Maroa had 23 total yards of offense. That is just unbelievable. And you know, just disappointed. I mean, I can't come up with any other name. I mean, whether it was, you know, if this would have been Publix beating Publix or whatever, these lopsided scores, I think regardless, it's disappointing. You want to see better games. You want to see more competitive games at a state final. Throw on top of it the weather. You know, you've got fans out there watching, and you know it's in the 20s with the wind. It's in single digits, and you know it is just not a good look. It was not a good weekend for IHSA and the state finals for football. As you mentioned, better games on Saturday. Obviously, NAS JCA, very good game. Also, as you mentioned, East St. Louis Geneva was pretty close there for about three and a half quarters until Flyers finally put it away. You know, but the others, Batavia losing didn't surprise me. You know, Jack Elliott has just been on fire in the postseason in particular and obviously carried that through. I think if you're a Batavia fan, you got to feel good that you have a quarterback that you've discovered for the next 2 years. Thought Michael Vander Lutgarden played very, very well as a sophomore, so that's something to look forward to. And I thought Loyola in York was a very competitive game. I thought Jimmy Connors leaving with that injury had a huge impact on York. Well, that in Loyola's defense, but I thought it was a very competitive game. So, I mean, generally overall, as far as performances are concerned, I mean, De'Air Hill might have had one of the greatest state final game performances I think we might have ever seen, Mike.
Yeah, and I have a few thoughts as well.
Yeah, far away.
Going over those highlights. Chicago Christian and Maroa Forsyth played last year in the early round of the playoffs. I think it was the first round. Maroa Forsyth won 42-6. So CJ Cesario, who we've talked about, just really turned around a program that had never got to the semifinals, let alone to the state final, let alone won a state title. The school has never won in its 100-plus year history a boys' state title in any sport. And I mean, maybe people are tired of hearing about CJ Cesario, but you can't really ascribe it to anything else. I mean, these are the same players that they had last year.
Yeah.
And, they went out in the first round of the playoffs last year. He gets hired, and as we mentioned, he turned the job down 3 different times. He was the sophomore coach at Mount Carmel, was very happy being the sophomore coach at Mount Carmel. They talked him into it, and I saw them against Illini West, and you could tell that with the talent that they had, I thought at that point, not knowing much about some of the 2A players around state, I thought Kenny Jaeger was a 2A All-Stater. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I think you could probably say Christian Flutman the same way. So they got 2 really, really good players for 2A.
Brock Sperling, probably one of the better small school linemen as well.
Exactly. And I mean, and if you got, 2 or 3 really, really good players at that level, you're going to be competitive and add the coaching element to it as well. That's what you get. No surprise really to anybody. I don't think that NAS JCA was the closest game. I mean, it was a close game in the regular season. NAS won that one 16-13. And, I mean, one of the things that, there was a lot of good nuggets out of the press conferences. And one of the good ones that I thought that Jake Jaworski offered was that his senior class has raised the bar at Joliet Catholic, which is remarkable when you think about their history. I mean, it's hard to raise the bar at Joliet Catholic. I mean, it's a program that expects to win state every year. But the senior class has been really, really good. And, I'm sure they're losing a lot of key pieces, but, I would expect the Hilltoppers to be back again. East St. Louis, kind of an interesting thing there. We've talked about, their troubles, defending the option when Cary Grove has been playing them 2 out of the last years. And, Geneva, very talented, but a more conventional attack, obviously, which East St. Louis was able to defend to some degree, but they also scored 48 points. So, I mean, and that's kind of the thing that maybe when you look back on those, Cary Grove games, it's like Cary Grove, everybody talked about how the triple option, kind of founded East St. Louis, but the Cary Grove defense also, did its job as well. So,
no doubt. And the other, Mike, real quick on that, the other thing as far as why Cary Grove was so effective, you mentioned the offense, and then obviously that offense is designed to limit their touches. And I thought going in that, Geneva's going to do what they do, but if you're not able to limit that offense's touches as East St. Louis, well, you saw what can happen and happen most of the year. So I just thought I'd point that out for sure.
Yeah, and I think the, kind of the other thing that, we talked about in the press box a lot, and we talked a little bit about it here, is what you're going to see more and more of, because it was so successful this year, is load management. And we talked about it with Jack Elliott. We talked about it with Ryan Fitzgerald. We talked about it with Bruno Massel. With Jack Elliott and Ryan Fitzgerald, it was partly injury-based. They were not, neither one of them were allowed to run for a good chunk of the year just to make sure that they stayed healthy. With Bruno, it wasn't so much injury-based, but it was about thinking about a 14-game season and, how you can be ready to play in that 14th game. And Don Gelsomino, the York coach, I think, based on what happened with them, they lost, honestly, pretty convincingly to Downers North and to Lions during the regular season, and they were not on a lot of people's radar heading into the postseason. But I think that was just a result of conventional thinking. Well, it's like, everybody was thinking, well, all these teams are playing each other pretty much straight up during the regular season, so how is York going to get so much better? Well, York got so much better because it made sure that Bruno was going to be ready to do this running in the postseason. And, as a result, they had the best season in program history. They'd never made, I don't think they'd ever made the title game before, had they?
No.
I'm pretty sure they did.
No, they had not.
No, they had. So that's something to keep an eye on going forward. I think that, again, Don Gelsomino with York, Bo Deschereaux with Loyola, Jordan Lynch with Mount Carmel, all were playing the long game this year. They said, we don't care if we win a conference title. We don't care if we go undefeated. We want to be ready in week 10 and be ready for weeks 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. And obviously it's worked out. I mean, Ryan Fitzgerald has been very good in the playoffs, and Jack Elliott has been unbelievable.
And Bruno Massel looked strong on Saturday night. Very strong on Saturday night. Looked great. So
he did. So those are some of, just my thoughts there.
Great. Yeah.
And to kick off, we've got a lot more to talk about, and I think our buddy Coach Pierre at 773, Coach Pierre, who gave us the name for the podcast, Pierre Nealon, he kind of
nailed it.
Gives us he kind of gives us the questions. So I'm just going to read what his questions are, and then we'll have plenty to say about them. So as public-private football debate rages on for 3 weeks of the year annually, if you had the power of an executive order, what is the first thing you would do with hopes of fixing the IHSA playoff system? So let's start with that.
Okay.
What would you do? What would you do if you had the power to do one thing?
Well, wow. Okay. What I think caused this, and what I think I would like to see done, which is going to be done, was, let's face it, once we got through the COVID year, a lot of the guardrails were removed and kind of reset, meaning multiplier, success factor, a lot of those were lifted. Now they're working their way into being back in effect. So obviously next season, you're going to see the Altoffs and the Montinis of the world, JCA. There's some others that are going to be bumped up either via success factor or just the good old fashioned multiplier. I don't know as far as the petition process is involved for lifting those, Mike. I know that there are always schools in certain situations where they are an exception to those rules, where you are truly punishing them by making them go through that multiplier. So that's one part of it that I think would need to look at and maybe be a little more strict of allowing those teams out of that. I think it was a combination of that. I think it was a combination of one of my favorite subjects, Mike, 1 through 32 in 6A all the way down to 1A. I think at least 1 through 32, the odds are better. You're going to have a better state final game. I think better opportunities for teams, the two best teams, to get there. I think that was the case in 7 and 8A. Let's face it, Mount Carmel has kind of had Batavia's number for a while, and I don't know if that would have changed. But who knows, maybe Batavia or Mount Carmel doesn't get to the finals if there was geographics involved. Maybe they play each other in a quarter or a semifinal. You don't know. I think 1 through 32 needs to be given a chance. And with the current guardrails being put back on and obviously starting to become effective starting next year, I think it's worth doing that and waiting and seeing the impact after that. My take on public-private, Mike, I've made this clear. It's been in my life every day over 30 years. How frightening is that statement? I think that, look, if you want to end this, put it to a member-wide vote and let them vote and live with it. I just don't think that's going to happen, Mike. But if you really want to resolve this, let the membership vote and let them determine the direction. Your thoughts?
Well, so my number one thing I would do is reclassify every year. Don't do a 2-year cycle.
Yep.
Because that would have changed the DePaul prep situation, number one, by allowing them. And again, let's state up top, we don't have a problem with what DePaul prep did. They won 4 games last year. We're not. I would, if I were them, I would not have petitioned to play up in spite of my enrollment, knowing that I won 4 games last year. And they hadn't been to the title game since 1980 when they were Gordon Tech. So I don't blame them for playing within the system as the system is right now.
Agreed.
But, again, it's like with the ebbs and flows of teams rising and falling, why we have to wait 2 years to do this, I don't understand.
Yeah, why is it so difficult to determine that? Why has IHSA been reluctant to not just do that every year? I don't get that part of it.
Well, part of it is that's the way they do it for every other sport.
Okay, gotcha.
But I think the obvious counterpoint to that is football is unlike every other sport already because it has 8 classes, because you have to qualify. So the idea that, well, we have to use the same rules for everything, including football, is out the window already because football is a special case. So I think that would actually solve not all of the issues that we saw this weekend, but I think it would solve a lot of them.
The one question, real quick, Mike, on
Sure.
doing that, isn't the DePaul Prep a real kind of one-off instance? I mean, how many private Catholic schools are really going up that large in enrollment?
You're right, it is.
But I agree with that. I don't disagree.
It still would have been dealt with. There wouldn't have been a 4A school this year if they had been reclassified after last year.
Yep.
In spite of, so the 3 things that are out there, that you kind of mentioned too. So number one, there is a multiplier, and there is also a multiplier waiver.
Yes. That
schools can apply for if they have less than a certain amount of success over a given time period. And I mean, I don't have all the rules in front of me, but that's essentially the way it works. And there is also the success factor, which factors in, and the success factor is different for different sports in terms of how far you advance. Like for other sports, it's like how many regionals do you win, how many sectionals do you win,
right?
That sort of thing. So those are the 3 things, and 2 of them can increase your football enrollment. One of them can decrease your football, or it wouldn't decrease your football enrollment, but it would not increase it, I guess, is the most precise way to say it.
Yep.
So, I think that should be done every year, and that's my number one thing that I would do. Number 1A, I agree with you completely about 1 to 32, and as folks remember, we had it briefly, just like we had districts briefly, and why? I'm going to throw it out there. I mean, everybody knows the reason is that other than East St. Louis, teams from Southern Illinois don't do very well in the state playoffs.
Right.
And there's a lot of schools down there, and they have a lot of power voting-wise. And this is not strictly a football issue either. The geographic representation idea has been something that the IHSA has had forever. I've been covering high school sports since the 70s, and it was a thing then, and it's never not going to be a thing. And there are always going to be in different sports, different pockets of the state that are better than others. And, it's unfortunate to me that we're not trying to get the best teams there. I mean, there's things you can't do because, like in football, Montini is in the northern half of the state, wound up playing Byron and Wilmington before it even got to state.
Yep.
So a lot of people would argue that those are the 3 best teams in the state right there, Montini, Byron, and Wilmington.
Yep.
But there is no way you could cut that under this current system to have all of them, to have 2 of those 3 get to the state finals. It's just not the way it is. And we wound up with the game that we wound up with, basically. So in 3A. So that's that. The next question, I'm actually going to skip over his next one and continue. With another question that's related to this, which is why would the separation of public and private schools work or not work? And I will take this one first.
Sure.
First of all, I don't think you have a true state champion if you do that, and this thing is cyclical. Like I think I might have mentioned last week, 3 years ago, we had 6 public school state champions. Loyola didn't even get to state 3 years ago. They lost. They beat Lincoln Way West in the quarters and lost to Lockport in the semis, which wound up beating Maine South in the title game. So we didn't even have an 8A private school playing for a state title 3 years ago. Could this happen again? I would say yes. This is an extreme example of private schools dominating 3 years ago, not that long ago, when these kids were freshmen, actually. We had the opposite. So what does all that mean? I don't know. But I think that we should have all the schools playing for a real state championship.
Agreed.
And I think that, that's my thought on that. So
yeah, I don't. Yeah, no, my take's very similar to yours. To me, you separate, you're going backwards. I think if you separate, you are definitely not getting the best possible football and the best possible level of football you can have. It's not like you brought in the Catholic schools 5 years ago. They've been here since '74. It's a lot of history there. And again, I've talked to more coaches than not that have said even the strongest of public school football coaches will tell you they do not want separation. Most on the football side of this do not want separation, and I tend to agree with them. I think we have to find a way to make it work for everybody. I think IHSA has been proactive in some regards. They need to continue to be obviously more proactive and quicker on the trigger, as you mentioned, Mike. So, I think it'd be an absolute nightmare if they ended up separating, and would not be good for the state of Illinois in high school football. So, I hope that answers it.
Yeah, I think so. The next one is kind of, there's three questions that are kind of all interrelated. He asks, are there too many classes?
Yes.
Can we go back to 6? The 8A game was at halftime at 9 p.m. Ridiculous. What can be done to have games start by the scheduled start time besides having 6 classes? With the many running clocks in a 1 to 4A, maybe that's a reason to alternate, have odd classes on one day and even classes on another day. Well, a lot to break down here, but first of all, it's never going to go back. There's never going to be fewer classes.
Never.
That's number one.
Yep. We're going bigger. We're not getting smaller.
Right. The idea of not running 1 through 4 and then 5 through 8, there's a precedent for this, as we all remember. For a while, they would flip the order of 6A, 5A, 7A, 8A, where 7A would be the last game one year, and then 8A would be the last game the next year.
Wasn't that like only 1 year?
Was it only 1 year?
I think it was only 1 year. But I'm sorry,
really?
continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
But at least there is a precedent there. It was done.
Yes.
Could it be done again? Possibly. But this is one thing I was thinking about too. When the games started getting really longer, and not just playoff games or regular season games, when they changed the rule about letting the clock run when the chains were moving.
Yes.
When they stopped the clock to move the chains. And I remember this very clearly because back in the day, every JV varsity football scheduled start time, they were 2 hours apart. And for the first few years, the varsity game never started on time. And people were wondering what's going on now. And that's what it is. And here's the problem with making games shorter. Coaches will always be 100% opposed. Coaches always want more plays.
Yep.
That's the way it is. They want more plays, and they don't care how long people are waiting to watch the games. They don't care about the fans. They don't care about the media. They don't care about anything. They want more football. They play one game a week, and they want to get as many plays in as they can. So they don't care if the game goes 3 hours or even 3.5 hours. It doesn't matter to coaches. So I think that's probably not ever going to change. But the interesting thing is that the NFL and college both did change that. The clock does not stop to move the chains in high school, in college or pro football. And one of the reasons they did that was to reduce injuries at those levels. But in high school, we do that, and that's one of the reasons that these games are so long, especially when you get these high-scoring games with good offenses on both sides. Chains move a lot, you know. So that's where some of that time difference comes in.
Hey, can I bring up one thing that no one's talked
sure.
about?
Sure.
One of the big reasons why those games ran so late, and believe me, I'm on the TV side, so I kind of got a pretty good handle of how involved the TV side is involved in this. And believe me, the TV side was cutting stuff short everywhere to try to get them back on time, and it just couldn't happen. The amount of flags that were thrown in 6A and 7A, Mike, it was kind of outrageous after a while. I mean, you know, I don't know if it's, you know, do they, and obviously this doesn't happen, but it's at some point, I think everyone's hoping, my God, put the flag away for a little while. They just didn't. Both games, 7A as well, flag after flag after flag. There was no doubt in my mind that really delayed and really extended games a lot farther out than anyone expected.
Yeah, I think there's something to that, and I think the weather had something to do with that. I mean, even teams that are playing the state championship are not going to be as crisp as they would be if it was 50 degrees in October. You know, I mean, I covered the Prep Bowl outdoors on Friday at St. Ignatius. I was up in the press box on Saturday, although we do have to go outside to go to the media room, basically. And, I mean, it was so cold that, you know, I don't know how the teams performed as well as they did. I mean, to me, you know, maybe the biggest performance, Jack Elliott, 6 touchdown passes. I mean, for him to be as sharp as he was, throwing balls, receivers being as precise in their routes, in that kind of weather is just unbelievable to me.
Agreed.
I could see how you could run in that kind of weather, but, you know, for Mount Carmel to be able to throw the ball and Jack Elliott to be able to throw the ball like that was unreal to me. You know, I mean, Deer Hill, you know, 32 carries, 443. I mean, not in any way to disparage that, but it was definitely easier to run the ball than it was to throw the ball. So, you know, what can we do about it? I mean, you know, people will talk about TV for sure, you know, I mean, because there were TV timeouts, unfortunately. Nobody liked them.
Nope.
We didn't like them. But, you know, I don't know I don't know what you can do about it other than, you know, kind of have the games play out a little bit differently. I mean,
well,
on Friday with the running clocks on Friday, that speeded them up. But, you know, we didn't have any running clocks on Saturday.
Here's something we need to consider for down the road a little bit. We're not going to get too deep in this because we need to move along, but I think we all need to remember the games are going to grow, meaning 8-man, I'd say within a year or two, is going to be under the IHSA window. And they're going to need to find a way to play a state final game in 8-man. So then you're going from 8 games to 9 games. Mike, I think what has to possibly happen here is IHSA has to get off the Thanksgiving weekend train, which I understand the appeal, but I also don't understand the appeal. We've talked about this before. That's maybe the worst weekend for a lot of casual fans that you could ask for. It's a holiday weekend, families in, people go shopping on that Friday. There's a lot going on. And the reason I say they're going to have to get off that Thanksgiving deal is because I think eventually it's going to go to 3 days. I think you're going to have to go Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And I'm guessing if, again, 8-man expands, and probably once it does expand, that'll be the route that they'll go. You'll see 3 on Thursday, 3 on Friday, 3 on Saturday. I think that's what's going to happen. People mentioned having them in different locations. That will never happen because of TV. Because you just can't have 3 separate TV crews running 3 separate games, 3 different locations or what have you. Everything's going to be centrally located, so it'll be at one location. And I'm going to assume they would be able to get those same locations for 3 days. But I think that's where that's going to go.
Yeah, well, there's a lot there too. Number one, not all the Illinois State fans were happy about this because they had to play their playoff game on the road at SEMO. They won, actually, but they got bumped out of their own stadium, and they would have hosted that playoff game had they not been hosting the state finals. So obviously that's the reason why we aren't playing in Champaign anymore.
Yep.
Because Illinois is never going to give up its home game against Northwestern in that weekend. So then let's say we get to the point where 8-man has a big enough bracket, has a 32-team bracket. Currently they have a 16-team bracket. That's why they finished last week, basically. They only had 3 weeks of playoffs, or they had 4 weeks of playoffs instead of 5. So assume that 8-man keeps growing, that there's enough teams playing to support a 32-team bracket. So if we get off of Thanksgiving weekend, after this weekend, does anybody even want to think about playing 1 week later?
No.
I sure don't.
Not after this weekend, no.
Okay, so then it's the weekend before. Well, if that's the case, then we have to start a week earlier, and then we're also talking about expanding the playoffs to add another round. So do we start the season 2 weeks earlier?
Yeah, I know.
Or do we go an 8-game regular season? But either way, you're going to have to start the season earlier. And some people don't like that, but it looks like, basically from what you're saying, there's no way we are not going to have an earlier start to the regular season going forward. Yeah. One way or the other.
Well, it seems to work for Indiana. And God knows, Mike, I hate comparing us to Indiana, but Indiana seems to make it work a week earlier. So.
Yeah. And actually, speaking of Indiana, one of the things that came up is that the Indiana played its finals this weekend also in the toasty warm confines.
Oh, God, don't get me started on that.
Of Lucas Oil Stadium. So Indiana plays in a dome. I believe, I don't know.
Yeah, here we go. You ready? Let's run through it. Iowa plays in the Unidome.
Right.
The UNI. Missouri plays in the St. Louis. No, actually, Missouri plays at Mizzou, I believe. So they are outside.
Right. But it's farther south, too.
Yes.
So,
yes.
What about Wisconsin? Where do they play?
They are outside. Madison.
Are
outside.
They?
Yep.
Okay.
Michigan is in Ford Field.
Okay.
Ohio is, I think Ohio's outside. So there's some holdouts. There's Minnesota is at University of Minnesota, I believe.
Okay. Well, so the problem is, we don't even have a dome to play in anyway, even if we wanted to.
Well, Mike, it's all about bear weather.
Yeah, well, it doesn't look like the Bears are going to get us a dome anytime soon.
Yeah, I know. Can we get a coach first?
Well,
sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's fine. And I'm going to throw out one of Coach Pierre's other questions, which is unrelated to what we've talked about. Are 2 early favorites or top teams for 2025?
Okay.
Well, I mean, one of the things we've seen is that Chicago Christian is the outlier. You don't go from being an okay team knocked out in the first round to the state championship normally. So basically you're looking at the same teams again.
Yep.
I mean, and you kind of saw that with Batavia. Batavia was a great example. Batavia returned 1 starter on offense, Zay Brown, and it has a different starting quarterback than it started the season with. And that was another good press conference nugget. Isaiah Abram talked about how supportive Gaetano Carbonera has been to him. Gaetano Carbonera threw for 2,000 yards last year, came into the season as a starting quarterback at Montini. Isaiah Abram replaced him, and Isaiah Abram talked about what a great teammate Gaetano was. So I thought that was a great moment. But again, Batavia's been kind of moving pieces in and out all season long, but, it's a program that does that. Loyola has players, I'm sure. Loyola loses some great pieces. They lose Ryan Fitzgerald, they lose Drew McPherson.
Yeah,
they lose Donovan
they're senior
Robinson.
heavy for sure, Loyola. Very senior heavy, but it never matters.
Right. Does anybody doubt that Loyola has some pretty good players that we don't know an awful lot about who will be pretty good next year? Of course not. So,
and believe me, I can tell you firsthand that the next coming at Loyola quarterback is going to be ready to go in the fall. So,
right. And other names. Well, Jonas Williams is back. Look at Waste loses a lot of seniors, a lot of really good seniors, but Jonas Williams is back. So, pencil them in.
Mount Carmel had 8 starters on that defense that were underclassmen, and they are just going to get better. Yeah, you lose Jack Elliott, no doubt about it, but they also lost Blaney Dowling, and things worked out just fine for them. And I can guarantee you that Jordan Lynch has a couple kids ready to go at quarterback to take over. So you can't discount the Caravan either. And then out of Chicagoland, but East St. Louis, Mike, they're here to stay. Another team that had some impact seniors, but a large part of that roster is underclassmen. So they'll be back again next year. So you're right. A lot of the same old names.
Yeah. I think that is it for questions.
By the way, Pierre, thank you. That's by far the best question we've gotten all year.
Absolutely. I will offer up a little bit about the Prep Bowl. Like I said, it was at St. Ignatius. It was the 94th Prep Bowl. St. Ignatius 47, Young 8. Jack Wanzung, the quarterback from St. Ignatius, that ran for 2 touchdowns, passed for another, and they successfully executed a hook and ladder, and which was one of 2 hook and ladders that I saw this weekend. I think we all saw the highlight of Josh Allen from the Bills scoring on a hook and ladder in the snow in Buffalo, which made him the first NFL quarterback, I think, ever to have a rushing, passing, and receiving touchdown in a single game. Ignatius did it a little bit differently. They had an offensive lineman score the touchdown. That was kind of cool. That's one of the nice things about the Prep Bowl is you can do a little bit of different stuff. Ignatius finishes 6-6. They went up to the Catholic League ESTC Blue this year. Didn't have the regular season that they were hoping for. 3-6 in the regular season, won 3 straight games. They're losing Jack Wanzung, who is their really good quarterback. But St. Ignatius has certainly been a program on the rise. I don't think we've heard the last of the Wolfpack.
Here's a scary one for everyone to keep an eye on, because we're talking about several of these Catholic schools are going to move up. Well, you've got some moving up. Right. You're going to have some moving down. Fathom Brother Ice in 5A.
Right.
They're going to be pretty good.
I know that some of these schools are moving up 1 and 2 classes. I think Althoff is going to go up to 3A probably. That's what they're saying. DePaul Prep could be even up 3 or 4 classes, could be up to
7 or 8.
7, 8. Yeah. That's certainly something to keep an eye on. But for Young, great season for the Dolphins. Most games, the first time they've ever played 14 games in a season, finished 12-2. They were really shorthanded this game. Their starting quarterback, Von Conrad, who is a junior who will be back, will be one of our quarterbacks to watch next year. He was hurt. And Nicola Dale, their 4-year starting center, was out as well. One of the rising programs in the public league is Young. So congrats to Dan Finger and the Dolphins. We haven't talked about Player of the Year, have we?
No, you know what? We're going to save that. How about we come back in a week and do that one?
Okay.
Yeah, well, let's do. We'll plan that, because I think we need to dedicate a little bit of time to it and let us, now that the season's over, we can look at everything and really narrow down. So, Mike, you and I will talk off air, and we'll try to figure out how many candidates we want to throw out there, and then try to determine who our Player of the Year is. So I think we'll go that route if that's okay.
Okay, and we'll it's like we haven't made enough people mad. We'll just make a few more people mad by doing that one too. So, and get the edgy free message board in a
tizzy.
About
oh, they already are. They have been. They have been since Friday morning. So nothing new there.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
I think that's all we have then.
I think so. Mike, again, just want to appreciate all the fans out there that have listened and watched and followed the podcast every week. Like I said, don't go away. We're going to have at least one more before we wrap it up for the year. But again, a lot of fun to do. I think we both enjoyed this, and it seems like the fans enjoy it as well. And so what the heck? Always fun to do. And just thanks to everybody.
Absolutely. And, we will sort out. We just kind of decided right here now on the fly that we're going to do one more bonus podcast.
Yep.
This was going to be the last one.
Nah.
I guess we'll do one more.
We'll do one more.
So.
We'll do a player of the year
and
next week.
And actually, the schedule's a little bit different, too, because signing day is this Wednesday.
Yeah, I know.
Sooner than it has been. So
yep.
This is a busy week for you and me, and the week after is usually not this busy.
Yeah, so it's good.
So
we can talk a little recruiting too. So.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Well, for Mike Clark, I'm EDGYTIM. Thanks everyone for listening. Have a great week. And again, don't go anywhere. We'll be back next week for one final Between the Lines podcast, as we'll talk player of the year and some recruiting stuff as well. But in the meantime, thanks for listening, everyone. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you next week.